Hello again. So in this short video, I'm going to talk about the emergence of English drama, specifically in a genre we now call morality plays, which make use of a literary concept called allegory. And we'll also see that the idea of allegory is a concept used in other forms besides just literature. So what are morality plays? Well, these date from the early Tudor period, and if we were to draw a kind of finish line on the Middle Ages, it would be around the time that this family called the Tudors ascend to the throne of England. I'll talk more about them and maybe a little more about how they took power in subsequent lectures. But right now it's enough to date it to around 1485 is certainly when the first Tudor becomes king. The heyday of morality plays probably lasts into the first half of the 16th century. It as a genre is pretty much swept away by the Protestant Reformation, which touches England in the 1530s or so. Often performed in guild halls. I'll talk about that probably in class on Friday, but it does represent a kind of professionalism of theater. Traveling groups going from town to town, putting on these religious dramas. They're very much didactic in purpose. So as you'll see, Every Man is a play that explains how salvation is possible through good works. Salvation is possible only through the church and the sacraments and from abstaining from sin. So they are kind of glorified Bible school lessons, if you want to think about it that way. But many of them do represent pretty interesting examples of theater, and we certainly see the first vestiges of that working its way onto the page. Central to morality plays is the concept of allegory, and simply what an allegory is when characters represent abstractions. Often in a morality play, you have a protagonist, a main character, who represents all of humanity, and we clearly see that in Every Man. The character Every Man represents the journey of every Christian. The protagonist then meets personifications of good and evil, or other kinds of abstractions, such as religious ideas, the sacraments, that sort of thing. So here you see an illustration from Every Man, in which our protagonist, Every Man, is encountering a allegorical representation of death. A kind of skeletal figure here carrying what looks to be a coffin. That's pretty obviously death, eh? Now, certainly, personification of death is not something unique to the Middle Ages. It's still very much a part of filmmaking, as well as their concepts even in video games. But the kind of standard dancing skeleton sort of figure, often with a sickle or a scythe to represent cutting down humanity. I think we all have in our mind a fairly common imagination or imagined portrait of death, and that comes from a kind of collective cultural past. Another very popular allegorical group were the seven deadly sins, sometimes represented by different colors, sometimes represented even by different animals. Here is a toad, a snake, a lion, what appears to be a snail, a pig, a goat, and a peacock, representing the seven deadly sins. Let me see if I can do this from memory. The easy ones obviously work this way. The peacock is pride, the goat is lechery or lust, the pig is gluttony, over-consuming. The snail is sloth. I don't necessarily think of snails as lazy, but they don't move so fast. The lion is anger. Now, it's a little trickier here. The snake is covetousness, and the toad is, for whatever reason, envy. I think maybe that covetousness in the snake might have something to do with the Garden of Eden story. I have no idea why they pulled toads into this. They seem completely innocent to me. Even today, if you update this, this is kind of image that you can find online, but also the idea of colors sort of attached to them. Red and wrath, green with envy, purple with pride. So if you were staging a play and you were going to have the seven deadly sins appear, there's some interesting costuming options you have at play. Now, allegory is certainly something that has its own rhetoric. That is, it makes an argument. The statue here that represents justice is the United States Department of Justice, more specifically, is kind of telling. She's blindfolded, so that idea that justice should be blind in the sense that it shouldn't take favorites. Here's the scale used to weigh or balance evidence, a sword of justice, tempered by maybe a scale of justice. If you look at the Great Seal of the State of Virginia, this is certainly comes from a 1770s. It was designed during the American Revolution, and I think the argument that the Great Seal makes is very much inflected by Virginia and the other American colonies' desire to break away from England. Here we have the figure of Virtus. She's the figure standing here. Virtus is the Roman goddess of bravery and military strength. It's interesting to think about why the Romans would personify military strength and bravery as a female figure, but I'll leave that for another day. She's standing over a tyrant, a king. You can tell by the crown that's been knocked to one side. He's holding a scourge, this sort of whip that you would beat slaves with, and the other hand is holding a broken chain. All of that sort of shows him as a slave driver kind of, figure like that. Her sword is sheathed, which sort of indicates that she wants peace. She's shown with one breast exposed. That represents her as an Amazon, a female warrior. And of course, the motto, Sic Semper Tyrannis, thus ever to tyrants, is a sort of warning to other people who would try to subjugate the Commonwealth of Virginia. In and of itself, it's not atypical of the kind of seals, flags that many of the 50 states have for themselves. That's just the one I grew up looking at every day in school. Actually, in the fourth grade, I was among the pair that put up the American flag and the Virginia state flag every day, so got a good look at it. So that's how allegory works. Basically, personifications of figures standing in for abstractions, whether it is an abstraction like justice or an entity like the Department of Justice, an abstraction like a political abstraction, whether it is a group of people, the state of Virginia, or whether it's a concept like independence. So your forum this week is to kind of find your own example of a current allegorical representation and explain it to your classmates. So for this, I want you to consider any number of political symbols like flags, seals, political cartoons about specific actions are often highly allegorical. Symbols associated with political movements or parties, important public monuments, famous works of art, whether they're posters or even corporate logos, often have a allegorical significance. So since allegory is often visual, be sure to include an image of the example that you're decoding. In the forum, I include an example of where I do what I call decoding, then that Great Seal of the Commonwealth of Virginia. So that's your midweek forum. After you read and watch Everyman, then your thinking piece for before next class is to really think of two of those characters allegorically. So after you've watched the play, go back and reread the passages in Everyman in which the allegorical character's knowledge, intervenes on Everyman's behalf. Now, throughout the play, Everyman's having a lot of trouble staying on the road to salvation or finding someone to help him. It's not until knowledge shows up that things begin to turn for him. So here are 3 questions for you to think about and include in that answer. First, what kind of knowledge does knowledge represent? Second, why do you suppose that knowledge and good deeds are personified as sisters? And third, which sister is portrayed as more important to every man's salvation? Okay? So those are the 3 questions for you to explore as you discuss the allegorical interpretation of those 2 important characters in the play Everyman. Say a few more things about key concepts in morality plays. Here are the plots of a couple of them, or 2 or 3 of them, and I think you can certainly see the way that as these allegorical plays work, simply by in a 1-sentence summary. There's a morality play called The Interlude of Youth, in which the character Charity reminds youth of Jesus' gift, frees them from riot. Riot here is basically partying, reveling, having a good time. It's not like a political riot. It's more like a riotous behavior, and brings him back to humility. So again, you're going to, in a production of this, we're going to have to stage actors who perform the role of charity or actually good deeds. And then you would certainly want the role of riot, though. That would certainly seem to be the best role to have in the play. The Castle of Perseverance, penance, touches mankind's heart with a spear and saves him from the 7 deadly sins. That's about as basic and transparent a allegorical message as you can have. Wit and science. Remember, wit really here meaning more like intelligence or reason. Wit falls asleep in the lap of idleness. He is transformed into a fool, then whipped by shame, taught by instruction, study, and diligence, then marries Lady Science. So that's, again, a allegorical plot line, which would prepare you to understand that what these characters, each character, not so much a character in and of itself, but a symbol, a representation of an idea. One other common allegorical representation that we see in these plays, and we'll see it even more obvious in Marlowe's late 16th century play, Dr. Faustus, than we'll see in Everyman, is the concept of Psychomachia. I tell classes that one thing you get out of these classes is a great name for a heavy metal band. So if you ever have a heavy metal band, Psychomachia would seem to be a great one. It literally means battle of the spirits, and it's often a representation of an inner conflict between vice and virtue. In Dr. Faustus, this is 2 literal characters, good angel and bad angel, who appear throughout the play. And they do, in that play, pretty much what they're doing to Homer in this scene from The Simpsons. There's a good Homer, there's a devil Homer, and they are trying to convince him to either do right or to do wrong. I think we can imagine which one won. Many, many examples of this still in popular culture. This has survived into whether it's the Muppets. I think this is The Emperor's New Groove. Even Donald Duck has a good duck and a bad duck. Famous scene in the movie Animal House, in which the character is presented a moral dilemma and has to weigh the best thing to do. He doesn't actually measure up to it, but circumstances prevent him from doing the terrible thing he's speculating. So I'm going to let it go there. I think that's an introduction both to what we mean by allegory, probably enough to get you started on Everyman. We'll talk about that play, and I'll even backtrack a little bit in class next time and talk about another genre called mystery plays, which are sort of precursor to morality plays, but of interest in their own right. Thanks for watching. See you next time.